I need to tell you something before I start. This story is not a love story. Well, it starts like one. It has all the ingredients of one. A man who worked hard, a woman who seemed to love him, a house they built together, a future they planned together, a life that looked from the outside, from the photos, from the Sunday dinners with both families, like exactly what a good life is supposed to look like. But this story is not a love story. It is a story about what happens when you find out that the life you were living was not the life you thought you were living, when the floor drops away, when everything you believed about the person sleeping next to you turns out to be something else entirely. My name is Daniel. I was 34 years old when my marriage ended. And I need to tell you, before I tell you anything else, that I am not the same person now that I was then. The man who is telling you this story has been put back together differently from the man who fell apart. And I think that matters. I think you need to know that before we go into the dark part, because the dark part is very dark, and I want you to know there is light on the other side of it. Okay. Let me start at the beginning. I met Sarah when I was 26 years old. She was 24. We met at a friend's birthday party, a mutual friend named Marcus who had been trying to introduce us for months and had finally managed it at a rooftop party in July. The kind of party where the string lights are on and someone has made too many cocktails and everyone is warm and slightly open and the city spreads out below and it feels like something good is going to happen. Sarah was standing near the railing, looking at the city. She had dark hair and a way of standing that was completely still while everything moved around her, not detached, not cold, just scented. Like she knew where she was and was fine with it. I found that quality immediately and powerfully attractive. I had always been the kind of person who needed to be doing something, moving toward something, always slightly ahead of where I was. And here was this person who was simply here. We talked for 3 hours. I know that sounds like the beginning of every love story you have ever heard, but what I mean is that we actually talked, not performed talking, not the kind of conversation that is really just two people waiting for their turn to speak. She asked real questions and listened to the answers, and then asked the questions those answers raised. She told me things I could tell she did not often tell people. We talked about her family, complicated, she said, without elaborating. We talked about my work. I was an architect, just beginning to establish myself. We talked about the city below us, about what we both wanted from it. At the end of the night, Marcus found me by the bar. So, he said. Yeah, I said. He grinned. I know. We dated for 2 years and then I proposed, and she said yes, and 14 months later, we were married in a garden in September with both families and too many flowers, and a band that played too long. And it was, I am not going to lie, it was one of the best days of my life. I loved her. I want to be very clear about this because it matters for what comes later. I loved her genuinely and completely in the way that you love someone when you have chosen them with full intention, not just fallen into proximity with them. I had looked at Sarah and thought, yes, this person, I choose this. I thought she had done the same. We moved into a house we had designed together. I am an architect, so the house was important to me, a real expression of who we were and who we were trying to be. It was not large, but it was thoughtfully made. Good light, open spaces, a kitchen that worked properly, a back garden that she planted every spring with the focused pleasure of someone who takes growing things seriously. We had a room that was going to be a nursery when the time was right. We had plans. I was happy. I need you to understand this. I was not a man who was quietly miserable and suppressing it. I was not a man who knew something was wrong and was choosing not to look at it. I was, as far as I could tell, with all the self-knowledge I had available, genuinely happy. That is what makes this story what it is. Not just what she did, but that I had no idea. The first 6 years of our marriage were, by any measure I can think of, good. We had arguments. Of course we did. Every real relationship has arguments, and the people who tell you they never fight are either lying or not actually talking to each other. We argued about money sometimes. I was careful with it. She was less so, not recklessly, but in the way of someone who had never been without it and didn't quite understand why it required attention. We argued about how much time I spent working architecture in your early career requires a lot of you, a lot of late nights, a lot of weekends, and she did not always understand this or accept it graciously. But these were ordinary arguments, married people arguments, the kind that happen and then resolve, and then you eat dinner together and watch something and fall asleep, and in the morning it is gone. I thought that was what we were. Ordinary. In the best possible sense of the word. In the 7th year, something changed. Not something I could name. Not something that happened on a specific day that I could point to and say, there, that was when it changed. More like a quality of the air, a temperature shift. The way you know a season is changing not because of any single thing, but because everything has a slightly different quality, a slightly different weight. Sarah became quieter. Not sad, not hostile, just quieter, more internal. She had always been somewhat self-contained. It was one of the things I had loved about her, but this was different. This was a withdrawal that had a direction to it. She was not simply quiet. She was quiet in a particular way, the way people are quiet when their attention is somewhere else. I noticed it. I asked about it more than once, more than a few times. Every time the answer was a variation of the same thing. She was fine, she was just tired, work was stressful. She was in her own head a bit. She would talk to me when she had sorted it out in her mind. I accepted this. This is the thing I have thought about more than almost anything else in the time since. I accepted it. I gave her space. I did not push. I told myself this was what a respectful partner did. You give someone room to be in their own interior without demanding constant access. You trust that when they are ready, they will come to you. I trusted her. 8 months into the quietness, I found the messages. I was not looking for them. I want to be very clear about this because it matters to me. I was not a suspicious person. I had not been secretly checking her phone. I had not been building a case. I found them by complete accident. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, and a message came in while she was in the shower, and I glanced at it without thinking. The way you do, the automatic reflex of a notification, and I saw the name. Marcus. Marcus, our friend, the man who had introduced us, the man who had been at our wedding, the man I had known for 12 years. The message was short. I only saw a few words before I looked away, but a few words was enough. A few words was more than enough. I am not going to describe what the next hour was like in detail. I will say this. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from betrayal that is different from any other kind of pain I have experienced. Physical pain, even serious physical pain, has a quality of immediacy to it, a sharpness, a location. You know where it is and what it is, and there is a clarity to it even when it is unbearable. This kind of pain is different. It is not sharp. It is not located. It spreads slowly at first and then all at once, through everything. And what it takes with it as it spreads is not just the present but the past. Every memory becomes a question. Every good thing you believed about your life becomes a thing you have to re-examine and reassess and often recategorize. The pain is not just about what is. It is about what was and whether what was real. That is the worst part. Not the present, the past. Sarah came downstairs. I was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in my hand, and I watched her come through the door and see my face, and in the half-second before she could manage her expression, I saw something that I still think about. I saw her know. Before I said a word, she knew. And in the knowing, in that half-second, there was something I can only describe as relief. That was the moment I understood this had been going on for a long time. I will not go through the conversation in detail, because it is not something I need to give more space to. What came out over the next several hours was this. It had been going on for 14 months. 14 months, more than a year. She had been in a relationship, a real relationship, she said, using that word, as if there were degrees of realness and this one qualified, with Marcus for over a year while living with me, sleeping in the same bed with me, eating meals I cooked, sitting beside me at other people's weddings, telling me she was tired and in her head and would talk to me when she had sorted it out. She had been sorting it out. She just hadn't been sorting it out with me. She cried, I need to tell you that because it matters somehow, she cried, and I believe the tears were real, and I believe she was genuinely distressed. What I am less certain of is what exactly she was distressed about. The situation, yes. Getting caught, probably. What she was about to lose. But whether she was distressed about what she had done to me, what she had taken from me, the 14 months of my life she had let me live in a version of my marriage that did not exist. I am genuinely not sure about that. I asked her one question at the end. I asked her if she loved him. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said yes. I moved out 3 days later. I know that sounds fast. People have asked me about that. Why so fast? Why didn't I take more time? Why didn't I try to work it out? And I understand those questions. I have sat with them myself. But the answer, when I am honest about it, is this: there was nothing to work out. She had made her decision over 14 months. She had chosen every single day for 14 months not to tell me, not to end things with Marcus, not to come to me and say, something is wrong, I am not where I thought I was, I need us to talk. She had made that choice over and over, hundreds of times. There is no version of that I could have worked with. So I packed what I could pack in 3 days: clothes, my professional equipment, the few things in the house that were specifically mine and not ours. And I moved into a temporary apartment, and I started the process of ending my marriage. I need to tell you what those first weeks were like, because I think it is important, and because I think a lot of people who have been through something like this feel that they cannot say these things honestly. I was devastated. Not in the crying on the floor way you see in films, not in the dramatic breakdown way. In a quiet, functional, daily devastation that is somehow worse than the dramatic version, because it does not announce itself, and therefore no one knows to look after you. I went to work, I sat at my desk, I looked at architectural drawings, I answered emails, I had meetings, I presented designs, I did all of the external things that a functioning person does. And then I came back to the temporary apartment with its rented furniture and its walls that had no pictures on them, and I sat in the silence, and I felt the full weight of what had happened, and I felt it very much alone. I did not tell most people for several weeks. My parents did not know. My colleagues did not know. The mutual friends, most of whom I was beginning to realize were really Sarah's friends or Marcus's friends more than mine, I could not talk to at all. The only person I told in that first month was my brother James. James is 4 years older than me and has always been, in the best possible sense, the most stable person I know. Not exciting, not dramatic, not the person you call when you want to have an adventure, but the person you call when the floor drops away, because James will come and stand on the floor with you and not panic about it and help you figure out how to get to solid ground. I called him on the 4th night. He came over the same evening. He sat in the rented apartment, and I told him everything, and he listened without interrupting. And when I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Okay, what do you need?" Not "I told you so," not "she was always like that," not "well, what did you expect," just "what do you need?" I said I had no idea. He said that was fine. He said we would figure it out. He said he would be back tomorrow. He was. The divorce proceedings began. I am not going to spend a lot of time on this because it is not the most interesting part of the story, and it was also genuinely one of the most exhausting and demoralizing things I have ever done. Not because Sarah was difficult, she was not, particularly, but because the process of legally ending a marriage is the process of taking everything you built together and going through it piece by piece, and deciding what is yours and what is hers, and what you share and what you split. And it is remarkable how much of a life fits into that category. How many things cannot simply be divided? How many things are entangled? The house was the hardest thing. Not emotionally, I mean practically. I had designed it. I had put myself into it in a specific way that an architect puts himself into a building, not just as a space to live in, but as an expression of thought and intention. And I had to negotiate the future of it across a table with a woman I could barely look at and a lawyer I was paying by the hour. She kept the house. I agreed to this partly because I could not afford to buy her out, and partly because I did not want to fight about it, and partly, and I say this honestly, because I wanted to be done. I wanted the whole thing to be done and behind me, and I was willing to take less than I probably should have in order to get there faster. My lawyer told me I was making a mistake. He was right. I did it anyway. The divorce was finalized after 8 months. 8 months of legal proceedings, financial negotiations, the quiet, terrible bureaucracy of ending something. 8 months of living in the temporary apartment, which had by now accumulated a few more pictures on the walls, and a coffee machine I actually liked, and a small plant that James had brought over one Saturday, with the instruction that I needed something alive in the space. The plant is still alive, 5 years later. I have moved it twice. I mention this because it seems relevant somehow. On the day the divorce was finalized, I went to work and came home and sat in my apartment, and I felt not happy, not relieved exactly, but something that I can only describe as the sensation of a very long-held breath being released. Not the end of pain. Pain does not end on a schedule, but the end of something that was still actively happening to me, the end of the in-between state, the end of the phase where everything was still unresolved. It was done. I was divorced. I was 35 years old. I had no house. I had half the savings I should have had. And I was, for the first time in 9 years, completely alone. I went to sleep early. 11 days after my divorce was finalized, Marcus called me. I had not spoken to him since the night I found out. He had tried to contact me several times in the early weeks. Messages I did not answer. One call I rejected. I had nothing to say to him, and I had decided, quite deliberately, that I was not going to give him the scene he was probably expecting, the confrontation that would have allowed him to explain himself or apologize or whatever he needed to do to feel better about what he had done. I did not answer because I did not want to give him that. But 11 days after the divorce was finalized, he called again. I answered. I don't know why. Maybe because I was done with the proceedings and the distance had given me something. Maybe because I was curious. Maybe because I had moved far enough from the worst of it that I could afford to hear what he had to say. He said, "Daniel, I am sorry to call, but I need to tell you something." I said nothing. He said, "Sarah and I got married last week." I am going to pause here, because I need you to understand what that sentence contained. My divorce was finalized 11 days ago. 11 days. The ink was barely dry on the legal documents that ended my 9-year marriage. And in those 11 days, the woman I had been married to had married the man she had been having an affair with for 14 months. 11 days. I sat with that information for a long time. And then something happened that I did not expect. I laughed. Not a happy laugh. Not a bitter laugh exactly. Something between the two, the specific laughter that comes when something is so far beyond the range of what you prepared yourself for that your body does not know what else to do with it. I laughed for a long time. And then I stopped, and I sat in the quiet of my apartment, and I thought about what that meant. They had been waiting. That was the first thought. They had been waiting, not for the divorce to be done, not for the proper interval, not for any decent passage of time, but just for the legal minimum. The very earliest moment at which it was technically permissible. She had married him 11 days after our divorce, which meant the wedding had been planned while the divorce was being processed, which meant that while I was sitting across that table from her lawyer negotiating the future of the house I had designed, she was planning a wedding. While I was signing documents that ended 9 years of my life, she was choosing flowers. I told James. James was quiet on the phone for a long moment. Then he said, "How are you?" Not "that's insane," not "I can't believe her," not "what does that mean," just "how are you?" I said I was fine. He said, "Are you actually fine, or are you saying fine because it's easier?" I said I didn't know. He said he would come over. He came over. We sat and talked for 4 hours, and somewhere in the middle of those 4 hours, something shifted. Not dramatically, not with any clear turning point, but a shift I could feel. The way a ship that has been drifting starts to find its heading. What James helped me see, not by telling me, but by asking the right questions and then listening to the answers, was this. The things I had lost were real. 9 years, a house I loved, a friendship of 12 years, the version of the future I had been building toward. All of that was real and all of it was gone and I was allowed to grieve it. But the things she had taken from me that I thought I had lost, myself, my capacity to trust, my ability to build something real with someone, those things were not gone. They were still there. She had not taken those. Nobody can take those. I want to tell you about what happened when people found out. Because this part of the story, the social part, the network part, the what happens to your world when your marriage ends part, this is something that nobody prepares you for and something I think is important to talk about honestly. When people found out about the divorce, the reactions were varied. Some people were kind. Simply, directly kind, they reached out, they offered time and presence. They did not make it strange or complicated. They just showed up and said, I am here, and meant it. Some people disappeared. People I had considered friends, people I had seen regularly for years, people who had been at the wedding, they just went quiet. No hostility, no falling out. Just a slow withdrawal, a gradual reduction in contact, until one day I realized I had not spoken to them in 3 months and neither of us had noticed. I have thought about this a lot. I think what happens when a marriage ends is that the social structure that was built around the marriage becomes uncomfortable for some of the people inside it. They have to choose, not necessarily choose sides, but choose what to do with the discomfort. And some people resolve that discomfort by simply stepping back from the whole situation. I understand it now, even if it hurt at the time. And then there were the people who knew about Marcus. This was the thing I had not been prepared for. As the weeks went on, I began to find out, through James, through 1 or 2 people who told me because they thought I should know, that the situation with Marcus had not been a secret to everyone. That there were people in our circle who had known, or suspected, or had been told and not known what to do with the information. One person, a woman named Lena who had been Sarah's friend since university, but who I had always been fond of, called me about 2 months after the divorce and said she needed to talk to me about something. She told me she had known for 6 months. Not everything, not the full extent, but she had seen things and she had been told things and she had convinced herself it was not her business or that she had misunderstood or that it would sort itself out. She was calling, she said, because she felt terrible, because she liked me and she had said nothing and she had been carrying that for months. I told her I appreciated her calling. She asked if I was angry with her. I thought about it honestly, really thought about it, because I wanted to give her a real answer rather than a polite one. I said I wasn't. I said I understood why she hadn't said anything, and I understood how difficult that position was. I said that the person responsible for what had happened was Sarah, not anyone else, and I was trying hard not to spread the blame around beyond where it actually belonged. She cried. We have actually become proper friends since then. One of the unexpected things, and there are unexpected things, I promise, I will get to them. One of the unexpected things that came out of all of this was finding out who the real people in my life were. The ones who showed up. The ones who told me the truth when it would have been easier not to. The ones who stayed. You find out who those people are very quickly when things fall apart. It is painful, and it is clarifying, and ultimately it is a gift, even if it does not feel like one. I want to tell you about the moment I realized I was going to be okay. It was not a dramatic moment. It did not arrive with music or revelation or the sun coming out from behind clouds. It arrived quietly, the way most important things arrive. It was a Saturday morning about 4 months after the divorce, 7 or 8 months after I had moved out of the house. I woke up early. I am an early riser, always have been, and made coffee and sat at my kitchen table and looked at my apartment. And I noticed, for the first time, that it looked like mine. Not rented, not temporary, not a place I was passing through until my real life resumed. Mine, There were pictures on the walls I had chosen, books on the shelves I had accumulated, the coffee machine I liked, the plant James had brought, a drawing on the desk from a project I was excited about. I sat there with my coffee and looked at all of it. And I thought, this is actually okay. Not this is everything I wanted. Not this is better than what I had. Just this is okay. This is a real life. This is something. That was the moment. It came and it was quiet, and I nearly missed it. About 6 months after Sarah and Marcus married, I found out something else. James told me he had heard it from someone who had heard it from someone, the specific way that information travels in the small networks of people who have known each other for years. Marcus had been involved with someone before Sarah. Not an affair, a previous relationship, a serious one that had ended badly. The woman had said, and this was the part that sat heavily with me, that Marcus had a pattern, that he was someone who pursued unavailable people, that the pursuit was what interested him, and that once a person was available, once the obstacle was gone, his interest changed. I thought about this for a long time. I am not going to tell you I felt satisfaction when I heard this. I want to be honest with you, and the honest truth is more complicated than that. I felt something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite sorrow, something that was almost like understanding, like a piece of the picture settling into place. Because here is the thing about betrayal that takes time to understand. It is not about you. I mean that in a specific way. When someone betrays you, the first and most consuming question, the one that takes up most of the mental space in those early weeks and months, is, what is wrong with me? What did I lack? What did I fail to give? What was missing in me that made this happen? I spent a significant amount of time asking those questions. And the answer that I arrived at slowly and that I believe is true, is that those are the wrong questions. Because what happened to me was not caused by something missing in me. It was caused by something in Sarah and in Marcus, choices they made, patterns they had, things they carried that had nothing to do with who I was or what I had given. I had been a good husband. I know that is a thing that everyone says and everyone believes about themselves, and sometimes it is not true. But I have examined this honestly, the way that you can examine things honestly when you have enough distance, and I believe it is true. I was not perfect, nobody is, but I was present and I was trying and I loved her genuinely and I gave her real things. That was real. What she did does not undo what I gave. That was the thing I had to learn. 2 years after the divorce, I started seeing someone. I did not start seeing her because I had recovered. I started seeing her because recovery is not a completed state that you arrive at and then step out from. It is a process that continues, and part of that process, for me, was learning to trust again. And you cannot learn to trust again in the abstract. You have to do it with an actual person. Her name was Clara. She was a landscape architect. We met through work at a conference. In the specific way that people who work in related fields sometimes meet. She was smart and direct and funny in a dry, understated way that I found immediately appealing. She had also been through a difficult relationship and she understood, without me having to explain at length, that I was someone who came with some history. We took it slowly. I told her about Sarah on our 3rd date, not everything, not the full detail, but the outline. I told her because I did not want to start something on a foundation that was not honest, because I had learned what that felt like from the other side, and I knew the cost of it. She listened. She did not flinch. She did not offer reassurance or tell me it was all in the past or perform the kind of understanding that is really just impatience with someone else's baggage. She said, "That sounds like it was really hard." And then she asked me a real question about something else. That was the moment I thought, okay, this one is real. I want to tell you something about rebuilding that I wish someone had told me. When you are in the middle of it, in the middle of the worst of it, the acute phase, the phase where you are just trying to get through the week, it does not feel like building. It feels like surviving. And surviving does not feel like progress, it just feels like not dying, and not dying can feel like not enough. But surviving is building. Every day that you get up and go to work and eat something and call your brother and water the plant and make the coffee. Every day that you do the ordinary things even when the ordinary things feel hollow. You are building. You are laying foundations that you cannot see yet because you are standing on the ground level looking down, not high enough yet to see the structure. I did not understand this at the time. I understand it now. There was one more thing that happened that I want to tell you about. About 3 years after the divorce, so roughly 2 years after Marcus and Sarah married, I ran into someone I had not expected to run into. I was at a design exhibition in the city. It was an evening event, the kind of professional social thing that I had started attending again, the industry equivalent of getting back out into the world. I was standing with a glass of wine, looking at a set of drawings I genuinely admired when I became aware that someone nearby was looking at me. I turned. It was a woman I did not recognize at first, and then I did. It was a woman named Rachel who had been at our wedding. Who had been, I realized when I placed her, one of Sarah's friends. She looked slightly uncomfortable. I smiled at her, because I had decided some time ago that I was not going to spend my energy on performances of bitterness about people who were peripheral to the actual situation, and she exhaled slightly as if she had been holding her breath. We talked for a while, carefully at first, and then more easily, and after about 20 minutes she said she wanted to tell me something. She said, "Sarah and Marcus, it's not good. It hasn't been for a while." I looked at her. "I'm not telling you this because I think you want to hear it," she said. "Or because I think it's your business. I'm telling you because, I don't know. I think you deserve to know that what you thought you had was real. That what she chose instead wasn't, it's not, she's not happy. I don't know if that matters to you." I thought about it for a moment. "Honestly," I said, "it doesn't change anything, but thank you for telling me." She nodded. We talked about other things for a while, and then parted ways, and I stood alone for a moment with my glass of wine and thought about what she had said. And here is what I found. She was right, it didn't change anything. Not because I was cold or indifferent, or because the part of me that had loved Sarah was gone, but because what I had learned, the hard, slow, expensive way that you learn things that matter, was that my life was not determined by what Sarah's life looked like. My life was not a mirror of hers. My success was not her failure. My healing was not dependent on her suffering. Those things were not connected. They had never been connected. I am going to tell you where I am now, and I am going to be honest about it in both directions. The things that are good and the things that are still hard. Because I think the versions of these stories that tie everything up perfectly are less useful than the ones that tell you the truth. I am, 5 years from the divorce, genuinely well. I have a different apartment now, not the temporary one, not rented. I own it. I designed the renovations myself, which felt significant. I have built it into something that is specifically and completely mine and that I love coming home to. My work is going well. Better than well, this period of my life, which I would not have chosen and would not wish on anyone, pushed me in directions professionally that I might not have found otherwise. When the structure of your life falls away, you are sometimes left with a clarity about what matters and what you actually want that is hard to access when everything is comfortable. I have good people around me. James, still and always. Clara, who is now someone I would describe as one of the most important people in my life. Lena, who called to tell me she had known and who has become a real friend. Several other people who showed up in the aftermath and proved themselves real. What about the hard things? Because there are hard things still. Trust, when you have had it damaged seriously, does not fully restore to its original state. I am a more cautious person than I was. I notice things more. I ask questions that the version of me who was married to Sarah would not have thought to ask. I am slower to believe that everything is fine when something feels not quite right. I do not think this is entirely bad. Some of it is simply experience, and experience has value. But I would be lying if I told you that the ease I used to have, the openness, the simple confidence that what appeared to be true was true, has fully come back. It is mostly back. It is better than it was at year 1, better than year 2, and I expect it will be better at year 10 than it is now. But it is not the same as before. And I have had to make peace with that. The me who existed before the divorce was a person who had not yet been through this, and I cannot go back to being that person. I can become someone better, and I believe I have, in important ways, but the specific innocence of before is gone. That is a loss. I am allowed to name it as a loss even while I am grateful for what replaced it. The last thing I want to tell you. About a year ago, I was at a dinner party and someone, a friend of a friend, someone I did not know well, found out that I had been divorced and asked me what happened. I told them the outline. They said, and she married him right away, like immediately after the divorce. 11 days, I said. They made a face. Doesn't that make you furious? I thought about it honestly. It did, I said. For a long time it did. Not the marrying part exactly, that part I could understand in a way. She loved him. She had been planning this for a long time. The 11 days was just logistics. Then what made you furious? The 14 months, I said. The time, the choice to not tell me over and over for 14 months. The time I lived in a marriage that had already ended without knowing it. The person nodded. How did you get over it? I thought about this for a while. I didn't get over it, I said. I got through it. There's a difference. Getting over something means it stops mattering. Getting through it means it changed you and you kept going anyway. They looked at me. Did it make you better? They asked. I thought about Clara, about James, about Lena, about my apartment, about the project on my desk that I was genuinely excited about the plant that was still alive. In some ways, I said. Not the ways I would have chosen, but yes, in some ways. I have one more thing to say. If you are reading this, and you are in the middle of something like this, if the floor has dropped away, if you are in the temporary apartment phase, if you are doing the normal things while feeling devastated, if you are trying to figure out whether the life you thought you were living was real or not, I want to tell you something. The love you gave was real. Whatever they did with it, whatever they chose, whatever the truth turns out to be about their side of things, the love you brought to it was real. That does not disappear. It does not get retroactively taken away. It happened and it was real and it was yours and it still is. You are going to be okay. Not immediately. Not in the way that means nothing hurts, but in the way that matters, in the way that means you will still be here. And you will still be you. And there will be a day when you sit in your kitchen with your coffee and look at your life and think, this is actually okay. That day will come. I promise you. It will come. 5 years later, still here. Still building. Still learning what it means to be entirely yourself. It turns out that is enough. Actually, it turns out that is everything. Asterisk, 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 she left me. But I didn't lose myself. If you were in my place, what would you do, broken heart? Let me know in the comments.